Last week, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu twice claimed that a Palestinian in 1941 convinced Hitler to embark on his campaign of mass murder, which has come to be called the Holocaust. I'll be speaking to Lenni Brenner, a historian who has been specializing in the Zionist movement activity in the 20s and 1930s and during the Holocaust in Europe and in Palestine. Perhaps his most well-known book is Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. He is speaking to us from his home in Connecticut. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Let me first establish your authority in the area. When did you publish Zionism in the Age of the Dictators?
Okay. I published Zionism in the Age of the Dictators in 1983 in Britain. And it was and then I went over to lecture on my book in Britain. And on the way to Britain, I stopped off in Israel, and I was there when Yitzhak Shamir became the second Likud Party Prime Minister of Israel. The first was Menachem Begin. And I went to a Palestinian English language newspaper in Jerusalem and had them print the complete text in English of Shamir's group, commonly known as the Stern Gang, or the Fighters for the Freedom of Israel, offering to go to war on Hitler's side in 1940. And then I went to London, and the day I arrived in London, the London Times had an article saying that Shamir insisted that he joined the Stern Gang only after they dropped the idea of the proposal to the Nazis. And I sent a letter to the London Times saying, this is completely untrue, and documented it.
All right, if I may, I think we're jumping ahead. We'll get into that, but I just want to first show the public what you've been writing on this. So
yeah, let me just bring it up. What happened as a result of my letter was that I got a call from the London Times telling me that Edward Mortimer, their Middle East expert, would like to meet me. And so I met him and wound up, he reviewed my book and said it was a wonderful book, documented, et cetera. And Mortimer later became the public relations director of the United Nations. So my book, Zionism in the Age of the Dictators, got unbelievable publicity. I would never have thought the London Times would, favorably
we'll get into that a little later. And then you wrote a second book, The Iron Wall. If you could briefly talk about that.
Okay, The Iron Wall, Zionist revisionism from Jabotinsky to Shamir. I wrote that in 1984, and basically what it is, it's a study of the predecessor of today's Likud Party. Now, let me explain that. Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, is the son of Ben Zion Netanyahu. Okay, Ben Zion Netanyahu was the personal secretary of Vladimir Jabotinsky, the founder of the Zionist revisionist movement. And my book, The Iron Wall, is about Jabotinsky and his role during the Mussolini-Hitler period.
Okay, great, and we'll get into that later, too, a bit. And then a third book, to back up both of these, you edited a book of documents, 51 documents that seem to be painstakingly translated from German and Hebrew and so on, to back up all the things you said in the first two books.
All right. The book is called 51 Documents, Zionist Collaboration with the Nazis. And what it has is, in most cases, it's the complete text of documents, German documents, Zionist documents, Italian documents, etc., that I had quoted in Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. But to back up Zionism in the Age of the Dictators, wherever possible, I printed the complete text of the documents.
Okay,
so that,
okay. Let's now go back to Netanyahu. So he makes a claim about the Mufti of Jerusalem in the 40s, and it's got enormous attention. So what do you think of this rather astounding statement that the Mufti convinced Hitler to exterminate the Jews?
Okay. You can't believe how much attention Netanyahu's statement got. It's been discussed in virtually every major newspaper in the world. Okay,
mm-hmm.
And just to give you an example of this, this is the editorial in the New York Times on the 23rd of October. It's called Mr. Netanyahu's Holocaust Blunder. And it starts, the claim by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel that a Palestinian persuaded Adolf Hitler to exterminate the Jews of Europe is outrageous. And then the next paragraph, it is outrageous because the Holocaust is far too terrible a crime to be exploited for political ends. It is outrageous because the only apparent purpose is to demonstrate, demonize the Palestinians.
And that's what the Times says, and I'm taking it
in
that's
an
what
editorial.
You believe.
Yeah. In other words, they didn't want to just sort of slip it into, as somebody's article. This is an editorial in the New York Times.
All right, as a historian, so what do you believe about this?
Okay. Number one, there isn't the slightest evidence whatsoever. I mean, all right, Netanyahu claimed that it was that Hitler, Mr. Nice Guy, was all he wanted to do was, get the Jews out of Europe, and that's all that he was doing until he met the Mufti of Jerusalem in November 1941, I think it was. Okay,
mm-hmm.
And that the Mufti, convinced him to kill the Jews, burn them, was what Netanyahu quoted the Mufti as saying. Burn them,
mm-hmm.
Jews. Okay, this is absolute fantasy. I mean, it's untrue, and the real question comes in. One of the questions that comes up is, did Netanyahu believe it when he said it, or did he just make it up as a lie? Because if he made it up as just as a lie, if you're about to make up a lie, one of the things you think about is what will people say when they read my lie? And, if it's a lie, if I can't document it, I'm going to get in trouble. So I really believe that he actually convinced himself that, the Mufti, that he's a fanatic, and he convinced himself that the Mufti did this. Now, let me just...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
All right, let me just show you in the real world, not only is there no documentation that the Mufti convinced Hitler, but it goes the other way around. I'm going to read now from Hitler's book Mein Kampf, which he wrote in about 1926, I believe it was published. In other words, long before he came to power.
Mm-hmm.
And this, all right, now, I mean, this is Hitler, okay? If, quote, if in 1914 the German working class in their innermost convictions had still consisted of Marxists, the war would have been over in 3 weeks, okay? But he then goes on to say, no, the fact is that the German people were then still fighting proof that the Marxist delusion had not yet been able to gnaw its way into the bottommost depths. Okay. And then he goes on. If at the beginning of the war and during the war, 12 or 15,000 of those Hebrew corruptors of the people had been held under poison gas, as happened to hundreds of thousands of our very best German workers in the field, the sacrifices of millions at the front would not have been in vain. Okay, now, in other words, long before Hitler came to power, before he met the Mufti, etc., before the Holocaust, he was already talking about killing Jews. The Kaiser was a stupid guy. He didn't kill all the Jews. He should have killed all the Jews. Okay. And then there's no doubt, number one, we have the German documentation of the Mufti's meeting with Hitler in 1941. And, there's not one word in which it suggested that the Mufti had to convince Hitler to do anything. On the contrary, in the course of the thing, Hitler says, look, if we beat the Soviets, we'll come through from the Caucasus into the Middle East, and we'll get to Palestine, and we'll kill the Jews. Don't worry, we'll kill the Jews.
And not to speak of the fact that they had already been killing hundreds of thousands of Jews in Russia, especially.
Right. I mean, so the whole thing is bizarre, and the quote that I gave from the New York Times is the general opinion of people all over the world. This guy's crazy.
Now let's talk about the Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husseini. If he didn't inspire a decision that had already been made, he was still pretty awful. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. He had he had to flee from the British mandate in Palestine in 1937, and in 39, 40, 41 he was in Iraq, and he helped organize a revolt there against the British-dominated kingdom. And then in 1941, he went to Mussolini, and hey, I'm on your side. Let's go. Mussolini wasn't really interested in that, and then he went and visited Hitler. Now, the public, that meeting was very important then and after the war. After the war, a photo, a Nazi photo of the Mufti and Hitler, sitting there and, chatting, was circulated all over the world, in America by the magazine The Nation, and, in the minds of Jews here and Americans in general, the Mufti was identified with Nazism.
Mm-hmm. And he had some relationship with the German SS, is that right?
All right. When they met in 1941, the Mufti offered, said, look, Adolf, why don't you announce that you're opposed to British and French imperialism, and you're for the Arabs revolting against the British and French. And what happened was Hitler said to him, look, it's a good idea, but I can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is that I am now working with the pro-Nazi Vichy French government, and they are running the French colonies. If I call for a revolt, the Vichy government in France won't work with me, so I can't do it. After we beat the Soviets, we'll march down into Palestine and take care of your Jews for you.
Mm.
So.
And the Mufti was, a collaborator in this kind of stuff.
Oh yes, Hitler set him up in Berlin, gave him an annual pay 5 times greater than the pay that Hitler gave to his leading generals. In other words, he treated the Mufti like visiting royalty. And what the Mufti did from day one in Germany was radio broadcasts into the Arab world. Okay. And then, in addition, the Nazis had him organize Yugoslav Muslims into the SS, and then later they had a big conference in Berlin, and with the Mufti as the keynote speaker, in which they organized Soviet Muslims into the SS. When I say Soviet Muslims, in other words, when Hitler marched into the Soviet Union, he captured many Soviet soldiers, and many of them were Muslims. And what he got the Mufti to do was to help the Nazis recruit these Muslims into the SS and into the German military.
All right. So this guy was a disaster. Now I want to go into what I hope will be the heart of the interview, because when I first heard about what Netanyahu had said, I'm thinking, do you really want to go and talk about the 30s and 40s, Mr. Netanyahu? Do you really want us to bring up what the Zionists were doing in those years? Now, you brought up Netanyahu's father before. Let's get back to him and Jabotinsky. Can you tell us about those people?
Okay. Now, in the Jabotinsky was one of the leading figures in the Zionist movement. When the British offered Palestine to the Zionists in 1917, I think it was, the Balfour Declaration, the British organized the Jewish Legion to help them fight against the Turks. And Jabotinsky is one of the main figures in that. And then in the 1920s, you had it has to be understood, when the British offered Palestine to the Zionists as the Jewish national home, what they meant by Palestine was what everybody in the world now refers to as Palestine, in other words, between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, plus what everybody now refers to as Jordan. Because, if you look at the Bible, the Jews settled on both sides of the Jordan River, that kind of, nonsense. But in the 20s, the British took Jordan away from the Palestine mandate and gave it to what is now the Hashemite kings of Jordan. They had been running Mecca until Ibn Saud drove them out of Mecca. So the British gave them Jordan as their kingdom. It was called, up until after World War II, it was called Transjordan. Okay, so the Zionist leadership, most of them said, look, we're not happy at the British taking Jordan away from us, but on the other hand, there are no Jews and no Zionists living in Jordan, so, we'll adjust to it. And Jabotinsky said, no, you can't do that. You have to revise your policy, because if you let the British take Jordan away from us, the Zionists, and give it back to the Arabs, that will inspire other Palestinians on the other side of the Jordan River to keep going until they got the British to abandon us. So you have to revise your policy.
So that's the basis of his dissent at that time. We're talking about Jabotinsky. Netanyahu's father was the political secretary for this guy. I'm concerned especially about Jabotinsky in relationship with the fascists and the Betar and fascist Italy.
Yes. Okay, what simply happened after that was that Jabotinsky continued along this line of thinking, and he came to the conclusion that the British were never going to let the Zionists establish a Zionist state in any part of Palestine. So he wanted to get rid of the British in Palestine, and he decided that there should be a new mandatory in Palestine. You have to understand at that time the Zionists were too numerically small in Palestine to run, to beat the Arabs on their own. They had to have an imperial patron. So he turned to, and now this is from a biography, I'm quoting a guy named Shechtman who wrote, who was a follower of Jabotinsky, and he wrote a biography of him called Fighter in Province. Jabotinsky wrote a letter to a friend in 1936 that his choice of a new mandatory was, quote, this is a quote from Jabotinsky, Italy or some condominium of less anti-Semitic states interested in Jewish immigration. Okay? So there's no doubt that he wanted Benito Mussolini's Italy to take over from Britain and run Palestine.
And he also had some of his men be trained by fascist Italy in the Naval Academy.
Let me go into that. Jabotinsky had one talent that was remarkable. He was an unbelievable linguist, and he had been a student in Italy before Mussolini came to power, and he spoke perfect Italian. Italians couldn't believe that he wasn't an Italian. That's how good he was. When Mussolini came to power in 1922, Jabotinsky's attitude was, hey, the Italian kingdom that he overthrew, they were nice guys. Who's this guy? A duce, a leader. Buffaloes have leaders, not men. I'm not a fascist. That was Jabotinsky's attitude towards Mussolini. But the one virtue that Mussolini had was that he ran Libya, Arab Libya, as a colony, and was merciless towards the Arabs. Every time they tried to revolt, he just hang them in the public squares, that kind of thing. So this is what he wanted in Palestine. Mussolini would take it over, and he, kick some rump, as we say nowadays. Kill as many Arabs as it took to help the Palestinian, the Zionists.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and Mussolini was, didn't want to get at that time in the early 30s, didn't want to get into a fight with the British over Palestine. I mean, he said forget about it. But what he did do was he invited Jabotinsky to bring his youth group called the Betar to Mussolini's Naval Academy in Civitavecchia. And, I don't have an exact number of how many of them went there, but it was dozens and dozens. And Jabotinsky told them, look, don't take sides in Italian politics. But most of them ignored him and directly joined the Italian student fascist movement. I mean, in other words, they weren't just pro-fascist. They literally joined the Italian Fascist Party, you know.
Okay,
And,
we really got to move ahead, though, because we still have lots to cover. So this relationship with Mussolini continued until Mussolini joins up with Hitler.
Yeah, what happened was Mussolini and Hitler, up until 1936, were always quarreling over who should run Austria. Hitler wanted to directly annex it. He was born in Austria. And Mussolini was in favor of the pro-fascist Austrian government. But then the Spanish Civil War broke out, and Mussolini realized, hey, I got to unite with Hitler to fight the left in Spain, because if the left wins in Spain, that will inspire my workers to try to overthrow me. And he realized he couldn't beat the left in Spain on his own, so he united with Hitler. And, now the revisionist attitude was that Mussolini, they had their own fantasy story about what really happened. Their story was that Mussolini joined up with Hitler because the Jews in the world didn't follow the revisionists into being pro-Mussolini.
Mm-hmm.
It has a, if you're not reading the documents, the whole thing has a surreal quality to it.
Okay, I want to jump back now to something you really opened up with about the Stern Gang and Shamir. So, and it was brought up this last week by Tom Ze'ev, writing in The Guardian, and he says, well, the Mufti did this and that, but, there was this split off from Jabotinsky's movement that everybody calls the Stern Gang, and they actually proposed an alliance with Hitler. Now, if we could now talk about that.
All right. In fact, I'll do better than that. Hold on a second. Let me just turn my page. Give me a moment there. Come on, guy.
Yeah, so we're talking about 1940 and 41 now.
Yes, okay.
Some documents that were found after the war.
Okay. No, I was...
You're there?
Okay.
I'm
hold on. I got it. Give me a second. Okay. What happened was that when, as I say, Jabotinsky at first denied that the war was even going to happen. Did I go into that?
No, I think we don't have time for it, though, but you can say it briefly if you want.
All right. Basically, Jabotinsky absolutely was crazy and wrote a week before World War II happened that World War II would not happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then, of course, the war happens. He was the only person over the age of 8 in the world who didn't think World War II was going to happen. But at any rate, when the war broke out, Jabotinsky decided, look, I got no choice. I got to support Britain against Hitler. Whereupon Abraham Stern split away from Jabotinsky and set up a group. It was called, it got two names, National Military Organization, and then later became Fighters of the Freedom of Israel. But every historian refers to them as the Stern Gang, because that's what the British call them. And what they did was they decided that they were going to war on Hitler's. They wanted to go to war on Hitler's side against Britain, because Britain, as the mandatory power in Palestine, was no longer interested in creating a Jewish state, and the only solution to anti-Semitism was a Jewish state. So therefore, they sent a memo to the Nazis in 1940, and then they sent it again in 1941. And basically, it's called Fundamental Features of the Proposal of the National Military Organization in Palestine concerning the solution of the Jewish question in Europe and the participation of the NMO in the war on the side of Germany.
And the title expresses it all. And we know the Germans didn't do anything with it. They didn't make an alliance with these guys.
Well, I mean, let me just read a little of it so people can, understand that this is all real. Okay, and I'm quoting the Stern Gang right now. The NMO, which is well acquainted with the goodwill of the German Reich government and its authorities towards Zionist activity inside Germany and towards Zionist immigration plans, is of the opinion that the establishment of the historic Jewish state on a national and totalitarian basis, bound by a treaty with the German Reich, would be in the interest of a maintained and strengthened future German position of power in the Near East. Proceeding from these considerations, the NMO in Palestine, under the condition that the above-mentioned national aspirations of the Israeli freedom movement are recognized on the side of the German Reich, offers to actively take part in the war on Germany's side.
Pretty incredible. And
it is incredible.
And then, as you said also at the beginning, one of their leaders eventually becomes Prime Minister of Israel.
All right. What happened was eventually the British killed Stern, and a trio of his followers took over his movement. And one of them was Yitzhak Shamir. And he later, now, understand at that time they had left the Zionist revisionist movement. But after Hitler after the Zionists came to power in 1948, most of them merged again with the Zionist revisionists. And ultimately, the Zionist revisionists became what is today called the Likud Party, the ruling Likud Party in Israel. And Yitzhak Shamir, who was one of the three leaders of the Stern Gang after Stern was killed, became the second Likud Party Prime Minister. And as I say, when I happened to be in Jerusalem when he became Prime Minister, and I rushed to a English language Arab paper and had them publish the complete text of the Stern Gang proposal in English in their newspaper, and that got picked up by the British press. And as I say, they asked, "Hey, Mr. Shamir, is it true?" And there was an idea, but I opposed it, and I joined them after they dropped the idea. All of which was a lie. I mean, all of it was a lie.
Now, Jabotinsky was part of the revisionist Zionist wing. As you say, they've been running Israel for about 30 years. But in the 1930s, they were the dissenters. The mainstream Zionists were led by people like David Ben-Gurion, and the United States Rabbi Stephen Wise, Rabbi Jacob Prince in Germany. Now, when the Nazis first came to power in the 30s, what did these Zionists do? Did they sound the alarm and lead the worldwide fight against Nazis?
No, on the contrary. When Hitler came to power, the German Zionist movement sent the Nazis a note saying basically, let me see, hold on, and I'll get it for you. Okay.
And while you're looking it up, I mean, we know other people, like the Jewish war veterans, demanded a boycott of German goods. They had anti-Nazi marches.
All right. Here's what the German Zionist Federation, they sent a note to the Nazis dated June 21, 1933. Okay. Our acknowledgement of Jewish nationality provides for a clear and sincere relationship to the German people and its national and racial realities. precisely because we do not wish to falsify the fundamentals, because we, too, are against mixed marriage and are for maintaining the purity of the Jewish group. Okay. Now, what the Nazis' attitude, you have to understand, Hitler comes to power in 1933. Germany was next door to disarmed as a result of the Versailles Treaty after World War I. Hitler was in no position to start killing the Jews, even though, as we know from Mein Kampf, he wanted to do that. Was thinking about it already. So what they did when the Zionists made this kind of proposal to them was they made a deal with the Zionists called in Hebrew called Ha-Avara. In English, it's the transfer. And the way the deal worked was this: a German Jew would take 5,000 Reichsmarks or whatever amount, and give it to the Nazis. The Nazis would then ship 5,000 Reichsmarks worth of German goods, let's say tractors and stuff like that, to Palestine, where the Zionist movement would then sell the tractors, not only to Jews in Palestine, but to Arabs all over the Middle East, etc. And this shipment of German Jewish money to the Zionists in Palestine was the cheapest way for a Zionist to get, or for any Jew to get money out of Germany. In other words, basically, the way the Germans worked it was that if a Jew wanted to ship money out of Palestine, out of Germany, the German government would nick him with basically a tax. You want to send 5,000 Reichsmarks out, okay, you got to give us 6,000 Reichsmarks, and we'll take 1,000 away. So this was the cheapest way of sending money out of Germany, was to Palestine. Now, almost all the Jewish organizations in the world, and all of the left-wing, unions in the world, and the communists, the socialists, etc., their automatic reaction to Hitler coming to power was boycott German goods. And, this is very, you have to understand that, Germany was a big exporter, and if it couldn't sell goods abroad, it would create problems for Hitler. And here were the Zionists willing to sell German goods abroad. And what the Nazis had the Zionists do was go to Jewish organizations all over the world and say, don't boycott Nazi goods because we're selling them. They're getting some Jewish money to Palestine. Don't boycott Nazi goods.
Let me break in here. If our listeners think this is just Lenni Brenner's idea, I want to read something from a document from Yad Vashem. This is in Jerusalem, the official institution that deals with the Holocaust and so on. And they had this article I was just looking over about the transfer agreement, and here's the quote: shattering the boycott was a key motive for the German authorities in concluding the transfer agreement. This comes from Yad Vashem.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing that I'm surprised at in this whole fistfight going on all over the world about Hitler and the Mufti was that nobody's bringing up the question of, that was what the Mufti was doing, or was supposed to have been doing. What were the Zionists doing? I mean, there's been no discussion of that. When this goes into interview goes into circulation, we'll be practically alone. Now, let me make a point to anybody listening to this. If they want to learn more about the Zionist Nazi collaboration and the Mufti's collaboration, etc., they should get my two books, Zionism in the Age of the Dictators and 51 Documents, Zionist Collaboration with the Nazis. And they can get them by directly contacting me at BrennerL21 at AOL.com. That's BRENNERL21 at AOL.com. And I will tell them how they can, buy the books and read the stuff for themselves. And
of course, we have an archive of your writings about this subject on our website under Lenni Brenner, and then another archive called Zionists' Dirty Secrets, which expands on this. And just to conclude here, I've argued that this transfer agreement with the mainstream Zionists and their fight against the boycott was the first major act of appeasement to Hitler. Do you think I'm right in that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, many of the right-wing groups in Europe who, became pro-Nazi, they argued, hey, we're only doing what the Zionists are doing. If the Zionists can trade with Hitler, we can trade with Hitler. Hitler's Mr. Nice Guy. Look, let me just end it this way. The German Zionists invited Baron von Miltenstein, the head of the Jewish desk at the SS, to Palestine. He was a guest of the Zionist movement in Palestine for 6 months, and came back and wrote pro-Zionist articles. And the Nazis actually published, I don't know what the word is, coined a medal. And on one side, it says, on one side is a Star of David, and on the other side is a swastika. And on the Star of David side, it says, ein Nazi fahrt nach Palästina, and on the other side, it says, und sollt David in Angriff. And what that means is a Nazi went to Palestine and wrote about it in Angriff. Angriff was the SS paper. Now I can send a photostat of the medal to anybody that contacts me at the email address that I just gave them.
And if people doubt you, there was an Israeli movie called The Apartment, where a fellow's cleaning out his grandmother's possessions after she died and finds all this SS material, because this was the Zionist family who had hosted some of these Nazi SS figures. They
had hosted von Mildenstein, yes.
Absolutely yes. Incredible, but there it is. There it is.
And I want to emphasize again that when the London Times favorably reviewed my book, Edward Mortimer made it very clear the book was well documented, etc. And a British Zionist publication called World Jewry, they reviewed the book and they said, look, the documents are all there. Lenni Brenner didn't make up the documents. Of course, he's a crazy anti-Zionist, etc., but he didn't make up the documents. Mm-hmm. So, there's no doubt that what I said in Zionism, the Age of the Dictators is true. And, in 51 documents, I'm quoting I'm literally printing up, Zionist documents, German documents, etc.
I was going to end, but there's one aspect. There is some people who take this talk about collaboration to a crazy extent. And, the transfer agreement kind of ends practically at the, 38 or something like that. There's some who claim that Zionists help in the concentration camps. I mean, this is lunacy, is that right?
Overwhelmingly so. I mean, the Nazis, well, let's put it this way, the Nazis very frequently appointed Zionists to run the ghettos, but not the concentration camps. I mean, they kill people. The worst collaboration during the war of Zionists with the Nazis was in Hungary, when Eichmann came there in 1944, and he contacted one of the local Zionist leaders and said, look, if you keep your mouth shut about what we're going to be doing to the Hungarian Jews, we'll let you send 1,000 Jews out of the country alive. And, that went on until the war was over, and then eventually this became exposed after World War II.
The Kastner thing, and that's a whole other thing, and there's even defenders for that. But I just want to make the listeners clear that there's certain people who are really anti-Semites who just go on with this and completely distort this thing. I mean, it was bad. The betrayal and the collaboration was bad enough, but it was certainly did not go on and helping Nazis in the concentration camp.
Yeah, well, there's a certain type of pro-Nazi type today who says, hey, Hitler is much maligned. He was Mr. Nice Guy. He was trying to help the Zionists in Palestine, and they helped him during the war. Now, as I say, Kastner in Hungary, he did collaborate with them, but he didn't do it on the authority of the authorization of the Zionist movement. He did it on his own.
All right, well, people should check into that whole thing. And can we conclude then that the Mufti was pretty darned awful, but the Zionists should be the last to point fingers?
Well, I think that's a good way of putting it. If people want to study Zionism and Palestinian nationalism, they have to look at both sides in a cold, realistic way. As a historian, my attitude is, I don't care whether I'm for you or against you, I always look for your bad parts. Because what I find, quite frankly, is that when I document how bad the Mufti was, people are more likely to believe what I say about how bad the Zionists were.
Okay. I've been speaking to historian Lenni Brenner, and I want to thank you, Lenni, for talking with me.
Thank you.
And thank all the listeners for listening. This is Stanley Heller for The Struggle.